All right. Good evening. Welcome to the Capital Planning Committee from Monday, June 21st, 2021. It is 7:32 p.m. There he is. He's in the audience. I'll move him in. Pursuant to Senate Bill number 2475, which was signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16, 2021, this meeting, the Southborough Capital Planning Committee, will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at https://www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite our best efforts, we'll post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. All right, good evening. We're going to jump right into our agenda. So first item is approval of meeting minutes from May 10th, 2021 and June 3rd, 2021. The first one was May 10th, 2021. This is with, was joint with the Board of Selectmen. I circulated the Board of Select. If you remember, I held this one last time, mainly because when we have joint meetings, it's always nice to make sure that both boards are on board and the meetings don't have anything that conflict with each other. My understanding from Mr. Purple is that those meeting minutes are not finalized and not on the BOS agenda for tomorrow night. However, Ms. Berry, who is the recording secretary, did go through the minutes that Jeff had provided and compared them to her notes and proposed a few additions. Those were circulated to the committee in track changes mode. Ms. Berry's edits are everything except for the paragraph where it actually talks about capital planning that starts with Mr. Malinowski. So the committee has those. I don't know if anyone had any questions, but again, the goal was to try to get everything in sync as best as possible to make sure that there's no conflict. So any comments or questions on the version that was circulated with the minor edits? I'm seeing none, so that I will move that we accept those as edited. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Braccio.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Interneater.
Abstain, I wasn't present.
Palmer.
Aye.
Bath.
Aye.
And Malinowski is aye. So that is a 501 vote. June 3rd, 2021, Joe circulated these shortly after the last meeting. Were there any comments or questions for Joe?
I had a couple.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So they say June 6th. I believe that should be June 3rd.
Should, yep.
That
Sorry.
was one. Nope. And then Joe, on page, well, it's my page 3. It was under space needs, RFQ.
Yep.
Ms. Esposito's last name is ESPOSITO.
ESPO.
OS. Yep.
Well, that's the second time I've been caught doing that.
And that was it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Sorry, my camera's not working, so I apologize.
We miss you.
Let's see, on 7A,
7.
it's on page. I think.
Yep, no, I got it. 7A.
So I did not think that the article was defeated. I thought it was deferred.
Indefinitely postponed is the
Okay.
proper term.
Indefinitely postpone. Oh, okay. Indefinitely postpone. Hold on.
The advisory one was defeated.
Okay, that's been changed.
That's all I had.
Anyone else? All right, then I will move that we accept the meeting minutes from June 3rd, 2021 as edited.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Brascio,
Aye.
Antonita,
Aye.
Park,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So that is unanimous 6-0. All right, so we have a few department head items here, and both department heads are juggling multiple items tonight. So the DPW yard tractor, Karen's not gonna be able to join us till 8:30. I felt pretty confident that we'd still be going then, so I'm gonna defer this one. I know there was additional information provided to the committee, but might as well just wait for her because I'm sure there will be questions for her. Item 4, I think, is a little clearer. At least that's my own personal opinion. So I'm going to do this one. And I told Chief Achilles, who's currently at the planning board meeting, that I would let him know if we needed him, if there were questions, etc. But given that he had sent some pre-reading, I was hoping these would be self-explanatory in terms of what the ask was, and that we would deliberate and come back to him. So he's on call, literally, for us, but I figured let's just jump right into it, and I'll kind of set the groundwork here a little bit. Is the chief is going before advisory on Wednesday night as a funding source to replace the boat, but because this boat that the details are outlined in the pre-reading materials exceeds $10,000, it actually requires a vote of capital planning under the capital policy. So I think this is a great example, candidly, that hopefully other department, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, I hope other department heads will follow kind of his lead in terms of just the brief summary and pre-reading, so we're not walking in cold to items like this. So I'm just going to open it up and see if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns based on what the chief had said. Again, if we vote in support of this, then advisory would then decide whether they're in favor of funding this through the reserve fund or not on Wednesday night. If it fails in either spot, the chief still has options in terms of potential interdepartmental transfers, finding line items in his current year operating budget, or as he put in the narrative, seeking approval from town meeting in the fall. So I'll go around the horn. I'm going to start reverse. Andrew, we'll go with you first.
I actually think it's legitimate. I think one of my just kind of looking up boats and kind of I'd educate myself. So this boat was bought in 2015, which it sounds like some of them have most of them have like a 5-year warranty. So just one of those. I mean, warranty's expired right now, but it's just one of those. I would like to see it replaced under warranty, but if we did have a warranty like that, but I guess I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in favor of replacement. It sounds like a piece of junk if they had to repair it, 6 times. And there's absolutely, you need it when you need it. I have to defer to him on the boat choice. So unless somebody can bring up a reason why we should be going with a cheaper boat or something else, then yeah, they got my vote.
Steve?
So I'll say first off that I'm really grateful for the summary. This makes it much more information to look at. So I think this is great. But one thing I will say is we're looking at something where I believe we didn't spend anywhere near this type of money to begin with. Just looking at what a 12-foot North Atlantic inflatable rescue boat costs, we're looking at going from something that's a few $1,000s to something that's $17,000. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that it's not necessary. But so I guess I just didn't see what did we spend originally on this with the hope that, it's going to last for X number of years. And are we going through a kind of a backdoor way to, buy a much better vehicle without going through, a more rigid, thorough process of figuring out like, okay, it's whether or not it needs to go in front of the taxpayers or just through the department. I'm not claiming I know. But do we have any idea how much this was originally from back in that 2015 range?
My understanding was it was in the $5,000 range. I don't have the precise figure. I can try to find that out while we keep going. The other, I mean, the chief and I had a pretty extensive conversation when he sent this over. The other thing I'll point out is, obviously, this chief did not purchase that boat. In just having experience in the fire service, there are just different preferences, and people approach these things differently, as all of us as homeowners, and when we all go buy cars, etc. But the thing that sold me, and I was going to say this to the end, but I think it's relevant to your question, was how they have to access the water, in particular the reservoir. There's no real easy spots in most launches. They're going over rocks, hence the issues that they're having with the inflatable, etc. And I think the motor was a big concern too, is the type of motor that they need for this type of boat is just different than, he had originally hoped to come to us, and actually wouldn't have come to us. It would have just gone right to advisory because it would have been less than 10,000 to just replace the actual frame, like the actual boat. But the motor doesn't fit. The current motor wouldn't fit on the boat. So he views this as one of those try to do it right now, as opposed to, continuing to repair it every 24 hours in terms of inflating it, etc. So I will try to get the exact original price unless Mark has it from the 15 town meeting while we go to Jeff.
Yeah, I don't need the exact price. I mean, $5,000 seems like it's in the right range of what I was thinking, just, looking at what you can find them for now. So, and my only comment was, going with something that's much more expensive. Is there a different process that we would normally have to go through to get a much better system, right? Rather than, and I would also agree with you. There are no great landings in our water bodies. There's no driving access. They can drop the boat and go. So, they're flipping it over and fly, trying to get in as quick as possible. So I would probably agree that this is probably the correct boat to be using rather than the smaller version of it, which is getting nicked up and destroyed for however 5 times in since 2017. So I'm not this, I'm in favor of replacing it. I just wanted to, just to make the note on it is that we're, going with something that's 3 times more expensive than what we originally had. And that's it.
So Mark, I think it's appropriate for you to, from a process perspective, just your thoughts on Steve's question to just react to that.
I'm actually trying to take a look for the 2015 warrant right now. So if you want to filibuster for a little bit more, I can get a number for you.
All right. Did you have any thought? Well, but hang on. But I just want, before I go to Jeff, I want just your thoughts on Steve's question about, he's saying, is this circumventing, a traditional town meeting process? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess it depends on, your thoughts of, defining, what's an emergency or what is, unanticipated. I mean, we didn't look at replacing this boat. It wasn't in the warrant. It wasn't something that was considered for a capital item. And then we decided we couldn't afford it and we backed it out. And now all of a sudden, oh, it's still failing and we've got extra money. So let's just do it this way. I think it's a true unanticipated expense. I think it's a valid expense for reserve fund. And I don't see it as circumventing, the process. If it was something that came up in discussions and we decided not to do it for whatever reason, and now we're trying to find a way to do it anyway, I think then you probably have a case that this is something that probably should be handled differently.
Yeah, and it was 9,000. I was able to find it, Mark.
Oh, all right. I'll stop.
I was just trying to give Andrew the edge.
Yeah, I see that. Your favoritism. The ex officios don't get any love here.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thanks, Steve. Sorry, Andrew, do you have something?
I was just gonna say, I also looked up, I think there's a 10-year warranty on the pontoons. I don't know if we're still, I don't know. If we want to fix it as a backup, I'm just saying, I think it's still under warranty. I think we should look at that.
That's certainly worth raising.
The one thing I will caution you is that when we tend to keep something as a backup, when we tend to keep something and replace it, but we're going to keep the old one just in case. When this iteration of capital is gone, or I'm gone, or Lisa's not on the board anymore, and this comes up for, the second one is really now dead. And all of a sudden it becomes a replacement item because we need it, because we have it. And so you end up buying another one. Now we have 2 boats. So
I would say,
just caution you on that.
I'd say at least get it fixed or get a new one if we can. And if we surplus it, then we have more value.
Yeah. Use it to help pay off.
Andrew, where did you get 10-year warranty? Because from the North Atlantic Inflatables website, it says 5.
I think I was on the North Atlantic Inflatables website, or at least,
Yeah, just like on their cover page, it says our boats come with a 5-year warranty, so do the
It's,
motors.
5 years on PVC fabric, 10 years on Hypalon, which is, I think, the material on the pontoon. And then 5 years on the hull warranty for the rigid hull.
Is that against manufacturer defect, or is that against actual usage issues?
Says, it's prorated and does not cover abuse or negligence. So who knows how if they were throwing it down rocks in the reservoir,
Yeah.
maybe it's not covered. But just,
So
Yep.
I think we can just take that back to the chief, given that he did indicate he was going to be doing surplus here. To Mark's point about keeping 2, we also got to remember staffing. I mean, that's why we mutual aid, right?
Yeah.
If multiple, and that's a perfect example of where you don't want mutual aid as your primary in this instance, but you can certainly get backup started probably a little quicker there. So Jeff, I'll go to you.
Yeah, excuse me, I don't have much to add. I tend to be in favor of this, given the safety and all the other factors that Mark just mentioned and Joe and Steve mentioned. So I don't really have much of a problem with it at all. The funding source, I think we can sort that one out. And I would agree with Mark about the not circumventing the town meeting point that was brought up. I think that this is truly from my reading, a situation that's wasn't previously considered, and you could make an argument that out of public safety risk, that we should consider it now. So that's all I have to say about that.
Lisa?
So, thank you, Jason. So, I think I agree with Steve that this is the correct boat. Maybe we didn't have the correct boat before, but I know if you look at the use of this boat, it was used in the last few months for a missing person. And to know that has a slow leak and that they have to fill it every 24 to 48 hours. I mean, if emergency arises and you need to go and you're out there potentially for a long period of time, we need something that's durable, that can do the job. And this boat seems like it is. And if it was 9,000 when we got it, and we're at 17,000 for a much better boat with a much better hull, based on the surface of the area around the reservoir as well with the rocks, I would certainly be in support of this as written. Thank you.
The only thing I'll add that hasn't been said is this is really the first item that's come. I guess you can make an argument about the field lights that we did a small meeting on earlier this year, but this process didn't exist from a capital perspective, 15 months ago, right? So this is, I'll call it, I think, a check in the process, right? Because technically the chief could have tried to cover this through his budget, right? Which would have tripped, a different policy with the Board of Selectmen, but this is tripping both capital review and advisory review based on where the funding's coming from. So definitely no shortage of people that will weigh in on this.
I do have one just small question. Maybe somebody knows the answer to this. Do we have to cover the river and the MWRA channels in the north? River to the south and the...
They have to respond wherever they're called. I guess it's probably
Fair.
the simplest answer.
Okay, fair. No, that's fair.
And if it crosses the town's geography, they do a lot of joint, I know this for a fact, they do a lot of joint training with Marlboro, for example, right?
Okay.
So I don't think they put a geographic there's a lot
No, I was
of
just-
mutual aid.
Yeah,
as
my
well.
only thought was that the water conditions might be different, and I have to defer to Chief Achilles, but that would be sort of the one question I would have for him is whether because it's a metal hull and it probably draws a little bit more water than the boat that they currently have, because it's a little more substantial, whether it might have any trouble in certain types of shallow river conditions or that sort of a thing. In which case, I'm just wondering if that could be a problem for them in the future. But that's not something that I can answer.
What I can tell you based on my conversation with him is Captain Sadowski, who is a directly reports to the chief, is on the District 14 dive team. And Chief Achilles mentioned to me that he was pretty instrumental in helping to find the right type of boat. So I would assume there's knowledge. Obviously, Captain Sadowski's been with the town 20 plus years, so
Sure.
he knows the conditions that they face, and obviously has familiarity with boats that
Yep.
not
So,
all of
yeah,
us obviously have.
just a concern. I don't know the water. I have not canoed the river. Don't know the conditions. Just was wondering.
Yeah.
We should get another hovercraft.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I am going to move that we support the request from Chief Achilles as written and send it to the advisory committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joe. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
I mean,
Jeffrey on mute,
All right, aye.
Hinterneeder,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So that passes unanimously 6-0. I'm going to go to item 5 on our agenda, revised charge and membership update, and turn it to our Board of Selectmen representative, Lisa.
Great, thank you, Jason. So we had this charge on the Board of Selectmen consent agenda for approval. And one of the things I had thought about in between us discussing this charge and coming before the board was the committee makeup of 7. And with the uncertainty of what town meeting has shown us, and I know that advisory has at least 1, if maybe not 2 members I've heard might be leaving. I think there's a little bit of uncertainty as far as even votes on this board, where we may go with vacancies. So one of the things I had suggested to the board, and they wanted me to bring back to capital, was I had suggested possibly would the board consider changing it to membership of 5. And because again, I worried that depending on where we ended up with advisory, we could actually be down to 4 voting members at potentially at any point. So I just wanted the committee's thought process on that. And then under bullet point 2, line 3, projects falling under the oversight of this committee, I was going to ask if we could change that to collaboration of this committee, because we would be working with potentially CPC, and they have some level of authority as well. So I was thinking we would not want to overstep that. So those are my 2 requests of the board committee, and it is on the Board of Selectmen's agenda for approval tomorrow night with anything I can bring back. So Jason, I guess I'll turn it back to you then.
Yeah, so Steve has asked not to be reappointed, so we will be down to 5 on 6:30. I think is an important part of that. So we're not going to be cutting anyone out. And then obviously between Andrew and myself, I think it's just important for everyone to realize that there's ongoing conversations about advisory in our quorum, and obviously the discussion that happened at town meeting. And there's another advisory meeting on Wednesday about path forward there. So, that's just to make sure everyone has the right context here. So, I'll open up the floor. I'm not going to go around the horn. I guess if anyone has any questions for Lisa, comments to bring back to her board.
I have a whole lot of comments actually, or maybe just a few comments very loudly. And I think that I would refer back to some of the comments I made at the town meeting, which is that if this committee is going to have its fingers in a lot of pies, we're going to need other committee members to have their fingers in our pie. and having more consensus from other committees on this committee, because we're already, you guys are already divided pretty thin. And I know the advisory guys are, and all the BOS advisory people on here are in multiple committees and really used. And we're going to need more people to help diversify the workload moving forward. And that means being on these combined committees and other things. And so, as I said in the meeting, I really appreciate the work and the input, especially of those of you on other committees, and bringing that to us and also taking that back, because whatever happens here is going to be much better accepted and affected at other ends if you're here making the decisions with the rest of us. And I think going to fewer members is probably a mistake because of the nature of the decisions that are going to be made. The more solidarity that we have, I know that everybody on this committee has been very encouraging in getting everybody to agree on things. And I think shrinking it is a mistake. I think the bigger the number, the more power that we have. And especially getting, I know that everybody harps on advisory, but I love you guys. And I don't want to see our numbers dwindle and then people try and harp on that more. I think we're insulated better with more members. And I think that having more that also allows us to draw more expertise in. I think limiting ourselves is more of a handicap and a hindrance, and it drains knowledge, and I don't want to say power, but say influence away from this committee by going to fewer and having our numbers limited by other committees. Just want to put that out there.
And I would agree with Joe. I think 7's probably the right number, but that being said, I could see and think it's probably a good idea to go to 5 until fall town meeting. I think the standing committee should be 7, but maybe 5, for the interim, just from a quorum perspective. But that's my only part there.
Anyone else?
And I'll speak on behalf of the newest person on the board, but also the shortest lived position. Coming in, there's a lot of work to be done on this board and a lot of time. So, I recognize how much, that Lisa, Andrew, and Jason, that you all must have way more work on the other committees and to match what is being done on these committees. I think shrinking it is a terribly difficult thing. And I think if you can find the resources to, have 7, it would certainly be advantageous. I say that tongue in cheek, right? As I'm stepping away, not having the resources for myself to be able to keep going forward with this. But are there other ways of getting the positions filled? Are there other avenues for this that would, make it so that way it would, spread it across, so that way the lion's share of this is not, sitting on the most senior people, which are the most worked people as well.
Yeah. So Lisa, maybe I'm not going to answer Steve's question. I think that's more appropriate for the board. But maybe I'll just add a few thoughts. Is I do think that your board needs to decide. I think you took some votes when Mr. Hinterneeder was appointed. When Mr. Reed and Mr. Belniak, I believe, and I know Mr. Belniak was also interested in EDC, and it's on EDC, is what your board's appetite is for appointments of either one or both of those individuals, whether they're still interested, right? And also, we did a quote unquote capital call when we found those 3 prospective members that stepped forward and did interviews with the BOS. So if we have members that are willing to be appointed in the short term, and it's the desire of your board to appoint them, then I'm leaning towards that we should stick at 7. But to Andrew's point, and I think it's a really good one, I'm not sure fall town meeting is the anchor date, but I would just say until your board has the ability to meet, deliberate, and appoint, I wouldn't be opposed to taking us down to 5 so that the committee can continue our action. And as soon as you're ready to discuss new appointments in that same meeting, adjust us back up. If you find people that your 5 members, and I realize you've circulated through one that was involved in the initial decisions, wants to appoint. I think that's the appropriate path in my own personal opinion, because I do, heading into summer and knowing that this committee does not have the luxury of stopping, given some of the stuff we're going to be talking about here coming up. I don't want to run into a quorum. Obviously, Zoom is going to help us tremendously, but I think everyone also needs a vacation, right? And may miss a meeting or two in there. So that's if we have well-qualified candidates, they should be appointed if the board so desires. If we can't find the candidates or not willing to be appointed right now, then I think we need to temporarily go back and easily adjust back up once the board is ready to fill those seats. On the collaboration piece, I didn't hear anyone talk about that. I'm strongly in favor of that. I really struggled using the word oversight when I had to reach out to some of the department heads to talk about what we're going to talk about next, because I don't think anyone likes anyone looking over their shoulder. It's just natural instinct I got, but I think the true intent is going to be collaboration. So I guess would weigh in that very supportive of that tweak.
All right, if there's no other comments, then my take back will be, I guess, have the discussion on 5, but I think we should probably, before we did that, then put it out there and see who steps forward. I mean, it doesn't make sense to put it down to bring it back up. So, and on the collaboration piece, I'll have the board vote on that change. Thank you.
Anything else, Lisa? All right, item 6, update on requests related to oversight responsibility of projects from BOS, including assignment of members to potential projects. So we discussed the listing at the last meeting. And I think Lisa was the one that strongly encouraged the discussion with CPC, which I hadn't had the opportunity to have yet, given the timing of their meetings. But I was able to attend their meeting, which was held live, which I'll be honest was very odd. I know, Lisa, you've had the opportunity to do a few live meetings as BOS, but it was no Zoom. It was live. It was at the senior center. It brought back some very old memories of some of my early days on committees. And it was a very collaborative discussion. I thought what I did specific to the townhouse was I just framed some of the requests that Mr. Parent had made of me early on, right after the passage of, looking for capital's help on his specific project at the townhouse, and use that as an example of, the department had actually looking for it. On the flip side, there was obviously Calander Field that also falls under CPA because of the funding source. I hadn't had, because Recreation Commission has not met. I had not had the opportunity to meet with them. So I brought it up in passing, but also when I sent a list to the BOS for consideration tomorrow night, did not include Calander until the Recreation Commission could discuss it. I have had a discussion though with the Recreation Director, and obviously he's going to wait for his commission to weigh in as well. So the general feedback from the CPA was, collaboration, which so I think is great with Lisa's change that she's making to or proposing to make to the charge, subject to her board's approval, and really acting as another set of eyes and ears in a sounding board for that department head that's required to oversee these projects. They all have day jobs. They didn't sign up to manage capital projects. None of them did, right? But it's part of the job, and in some years can take more time than others. I think Mark knows that very well from the past couple of years. And also providing, a resource to help look at expenditures that come in both from an OPM, a designer, and ultimately a general contractor, to make sure that the work that they said was completed was actually completed. I would say the only pushback I got was someone said, well, there's an OPM, for example, on the townhouse project. Why do you need capital to be involved? And I actually used the golf course road and parking lot. That was a CPA funded project, but it was bid jointly with the public safety building. That was done by the public safety general contractor in their subs. However, the public safety building committee, when invoices came in, had no authority to look at the invoices, think about them, review quality of work. It all defaulted to CPC. So, and I'll be honest, there in the OPM was kind of, they were looking at it, but didn't really weigh in. And even the OPM said to us and continues to say to us that having investment from a town official perspective, whether it be an employee such as the town administrator or department head, but also boards and committees, are what leads to the most successful projects. And we talked just a lot about how that road, that golf road, could have been a little different if there had been someone kind of there from a capital perspective, given there was no other committee for that could have worked with the CPC liaison. Because Ms. Gillespie, who now works for the CPC but was chair at the time, also commented how she had tried in the past during her chair, while she was the chair, to encourage members to have one on, like, responsibility for certain projects. But I think everyone just has obviously different bandwidths in our volunteer roles. So that was kind of the feedback I got. They did not take a motion, but there was general support in the room. They knew what we were going to be requesting. And in the email that I sent to Mark for the Board of Selectmen packet, their chair, Mr. Mills, was copied on it as well. So I feel like the appropriate conversations have been had. Just so everyone's aware, the Board of Selectmen will be taking up townhouse, fire tender, and library renovations tomorrow night. And then Calander, once recreation weighs in, we as a committee will meet and discuss whether we want to seek an assignment there. That makes sense? Any questions? So I guess the question is, do we want to assign a member tonight, or do we want to wait till our next meeting and wait for the BOS to vote? Obviously, if the BOS vote not to do this, then it's a moot point. But if the BOS vote to do it, I know Mr. Parent in particular is already going out to RFQs on the townhouse. The chief is in the middle of a grant cycle on the tender, for example, and there's weekly award announcements. And he obviously has to design a spec, et cetera. Those are the two that come to mind as like the most urgent, but I'm different. I put it on the agenda in case we decided to take a vote or discuss it.
I think if we know somebody that's interested in one of them, might as well, just in case something comes up sooner rather than later.
Does anyone have any particular interests?
Jason, I nominate you for the fire tender.
Yes, I have an interest.
As the
in
only
that
one that's ever ridden on one, probably I would like your input on that. That's what I'll ask.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I did have I should have said, obviously I've talked to Mr. Parent a lot about the townhouse, but I am very respectful of the strong chief statute that does exist in the state of Massachusetts, that the town of Southborough has actually adopted in terms of the authority that the fire chief has over his budget, but and just overall departmental operations. But I had a good conversation with him when we were talking about the rescue boat, about where I think we could potentially add something. Obviously, if it's grant funded, this is gonna be a moot point. But if it's not grant funded, then just bouncing ideas off of each other, I think, is always healthy. And so I'd be happy to do that one.
Should we vote on that?
Well, let's get, let's try to bundle. Go ahead, Joe.
What are the specifics we're looking for each person to do relative to each project? I think is sort of my question.
So I think first and foremost, it's a liaison, right? So it's not an open public meeting. It's just someone that if the department head has just wants to bounce something off of someone, keep someone updated, that's the person, right? So in this instance, every meeting, there will be a capital project update on our future agendas, right? Just like we've done with some of these subcommittees. And if you use the tender as an example, I would say, no grant awarded, chief is working on spec. That would be the status for tonight, sort of thing. And then over time, as invoices come in, some of these projects have one invoice. Some of these projects, like the townhouse, that's going to be 2 years worth of invoices that we can basically, like we've talked about in the past, replicate what we've done for the public safety building and change it to whatever anyone wants to do. But I think that's each one's going to take on a little bit of life of its own. But Joe, I view this as, and this is what I told CPC too, and I should have mentioned it before, is this is trial and error. Like I told them, I want honest, true, hard feedback. I don't care, hurt my feelings, right? Like, but we're trying to come up with something that's collaborative, that works, that really gives the taxpayers transparency of, you just approved something. I used the townhouse for over $2 million at town meeting. But guess what? We're only going to spend what we need to spend of it. And we're going to do it the right way. We're going to bid it at the right time so that we get the best construction season, right? That was one of the huge keys. It sounds so simple when we say it, but if we hadn't bid that public safety building when we bid it, we're looking at a very different result there. Not only just due to tariffs and stuff like that, but construction seasons, but it's also kind of driving, right? If you see something slipping, right, it's kind of driving to make sure that we're on pace, right? That was one of, I think, the successes with public safety was in the background whispering, right? Not calling people out, but just whispering, hey, we really need to get this OPM on board. The OPM is falling behind, or getting the OPM to ride the architect, or, those sorts of things were very important and critical to success. So like the tender shouldn't be a lot of work. Library renovations, not a lot of work. Townhouse, decent. We end up doing a new building sometime, renovate a building. That's where the labor is going to come in. But it's also, in my opinion, to inform future decisions that we make as a committee, right? Like in terms of, we think we know what a cost should be, but did we ask the right questions, right? So it's also education, I think. And the longer any of us serve on this committee, the better we're going to be at doing it. So I think those are the benefits I see. I welcome thoughts from others.
I'll take the library.
All right. Everyone good with Joe taking the library? Townhouse?
I would say yes to that, but I think that's probably more two of us, given that the scope of that project, because I'm betting that we're going to need to stay on top of multiple elements at the same time.
So my only concern with two, I would love to do two, is I think you will potentially have open meeting law issues because of subcommittee.
Fair enough.
So I'd love to be able to do that, Joe. Don't get me.
No. You had me at open meeting laws.
Yeah. So I don't see anyone jumping up and down with that one.
That's a lot of work. That's the only.
That one's going to
That's
be
the part.
All right. So how about this? I will.
Mark's volunteering.
Yeah, no, I was simply going to say you could have a primary and a backup
Yeah.
if you want to do that.
Jason, is there somebody from CPC that's looking to maybe oversee it? And then it's a little bit less of a role?
I didn't get that impression. I can
Okay.
certainly go back and ask. I asked who could be our partner, and that was when the room went very silent.
We're also talking Calander as well, correct? In this bundle?
I would like to defer conversation on Calander until Recreation Commission can weigh in out of respect for what they do.
Okay.
But they have said in prior public meetings, they would love a member of Recreation Commission that had more knowledge in capital oversight. I remember that vividly from a prior meeting in and around the time we were being formed. So I don't know what this Recreation Commission is going to vote on. I did have a conversation with the Recreation Director and have his thoughts, but ultimately he's going to also defer to the 5 people he spends the most time with.
Did you just infer there that they'd like to place a member from recreation on our committee?
No,
Okay.
no, vice versa, in terms of when they've been trying to do some of their recruitment for open seats,
Oh,
they've
okay.
specifically targeted potential capital expertise.
All right.
So here's what I will do is I'm willing to, at least for now, be a conduit for Mr. Parent, help him get a process set up. And I would love to, especially if the school stuff takes the turn that I'm expecting it to take in terms of where they decide to go, hand the playbook over from public safety for someone else to learn alongside. Doesn't mean that John can't still call if there's something that that person doesn't know, but it also may give us a chance, depending on what the BOS does with our seats, to allow others that maybe aren't here right now to step in. That makes sense?
When is John anticipating really starting construction? Like really
He-
get?
Well, I think his RFQ for OPM went out this week. So I think you're looking at then you've got to do RFQ for designer. So that's another 30 days. And then you've got to do bid documents, which require the designer. So I think you're looking at fall at the earliest, but likely probably not till next spring. It's a painful process to get to scaffolding on the side of that building.
Yep.
Okay. I don't think we need a motion, but if someone wants the motion, I'm happy to entertain one. I think clearly we've discussed what we want to do.
I think we're still a little up in the air, so why don't we leave a motion till the next meeting when everything becomes more certain?
Okay.
I would prefer that. And
All right. Anyone object to Joe's thoughts?
No, I think that's fine.
All right. All right. So I combined chairs and members updates because I didn't know who was going to make what. So school research subcommittee, nothing to update on. I'm waiting for, I was trying to give the superintendent the benefit of school ending before we chart the next steps there, but they do have some work streams that the administration team that works during the summer will be working through that will cause that committee to need to meet. I think Zoom will help based on schedules and et cetera. So no other relevant updates there. Shopsy South Union subcommittee. Andrew, you have anything there?
So I worked with Dorianne. We put together a draft of a charge, pretty similar to what we had. And we submitted it to BOS. I think it's in your packet for tomorrow, right, Lisa? So if anybody wants to, they can read the charge on the BOS website, but it's almost identical to what we talked about in this meeting.
Yep, and Shopsy had taken a vote as well. They voted on the charge and appointing 2 members. And planning board was gonna discuss tonight appointing the planning board member. So tomorrow, the board of selectmen could wrap the whole thing up.
And if Lisa, you want to come up with a more creative, shorter name, that was the best that we could come up with.
I thought it was great, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you for all you did.
No problem.
All right, so Andrew and Joe, I'm going to leave that on the agenda for you guys to provide whatever updates you want. Every meeting, it can be nothing, and we'll move forward. DPW capital planning. So Andrew, I left this on the agenda for you. I know a few meetings ago, we had asked you to kind of go off and start to think. I think it was in particular the road maintenance and sidewalk maintenance when we were starting to make some of the tough decisions around what to bring forward to the 2021 annual town meeting. We kind of sent you off as our rep, and I think you maybe we're going to try to team up with someone for Public Works Planning Board. I guess, do you have any updates on where you're at or anything you need from this committee as a whole at this point?
Not so much from the committee, maybe from Mark. I'm just having a little bit of trouble getting time with Karen and traction to kind of get that kind of strategic planning process going. But that's not the extent of it. And on top of that, I think there's going to be some strategic planning and things that come out of the American Rescue Plan that kind of dovetails into that.
Do you have a timeline of what you were looking? Not saying Karen could accomplish it, but I guess a timeline of what you were thinking. And did you team up with, I guess, did you team up with someone from Public Works Planning Board yet? I know they haven't had a recent meeting, so.
No, not yet.
Okay. But do you have, I guess, based on your review of everything, do you have a timing of when you're looking to, obviously, start soon or ASAP, but when you think something actually substantially needs to be done to inform X, Y, or Z decision?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping to have something done by early August, but I'm having trouble getting help. So,
All right, Mark, you got a note on that? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to, let me just skip item 8 for a second, in hopes that we can get through 9. I'll actually then entertain public comment, and then I'll do another public comment at the end, in case there's any. But to allow Karen to go, and then we'll go into the RFQs. They don't have any objection to that ordering? Okay. So on 9, for the FY, I thought it was a typo when I just looked at it, but it's really true, right? FY23 capital timeline and next steps. I know the Board of Selectmen are discussing a potential date. Sounds like it's moving towards an official, I mean, I think they've already voted to hold one. It's just a matter of when. So what I did, I consulted with Mark and Brian after our last meeting, and we kind of made the joint decision that I sent an email to department heads asking that they send us a letter of intent. So basically just what they were looking for by the end of this month, if they were planning to seek a capital item at the fall town meeting, i.e. something that hadn't been anticipated. So for example, the boat we just discussed would have been probably a pretty good example, or something that they felt needed to be accelerated for a fall approval and couldn't wait till the spring. Maybe so something that was on our capital plan for next year, or candidly something that just wasn't there at all that they wanted us to consider. And I've heard nothing back yet. I will probably send one more reminder email. I do think in that email, I am going to maybe add something I didn't have before, was given procurement life cycles at this point, in hearing how long certain things are taking to get in this world, that never used to take more than a couple of days. I was going to strongly encourage people just to make sure that they're not putting themselves in a tough position by waiting till next year for authorization. I don't want to have anything to consider, but I also don't want to be in a situation where we're kind of caught flat-footed from a procurement life cycle. So just throwing that out there. If anyone has any thoughts on the fall timeline, that's so that we can meet this summer with the department head, let them articulate their need. But again, I haven't received anything yet, but they still have 9 more days. Any comments, questions on that? Okay. Sorry, I heard an echo. Or is that just me echoing? All right. So, and then for the 2022 annual town meeting, the goal based on the discussion with Mark and Brian is most of the people involved with the year-end close process for the town, which hopefully everyone's aware it's 9 days from now, does not usually have capital items. So we're trying to be cognizant of that process. That is obviously a daunting process that's ahead for our finance team. So we've decided that we will give department heads until about the middle of August to make updates to their capital plan, which would include the 2022 annual town meeting requests, It would also include adjustments to things that may be coming in the next few years. And it would also include adding on, I'll call it year 10 to the capital plan across all departments. In a future meeting, I think before we send that email out, we'll obviously agree on the final form template that Joe has done a lot of work on. We do have a couple options that we are working to get it into, I'll call it the fillable format, Joe. And once we can share what the department head will share, I think we'll kind of take a vote to agree on that as our format for next year and go from there. I kind of, Joe, hearing some of the feedback and obviously my own personal feedback, if there's a way to weave in some of what Chief Achilles did on that request, I think or show it as an example to certain department heads, I think that'll also be helpful. Any questions, comments, thoughts, changes to that? And I'm planning to follow the same timeline we did last year, as we make an initial recommendation early fall to the BOS, and then obviously as developments occur in the budget cycle or more information becomes available, we adjust as needed. All right. I'm going to open it for public comment. If anyone has any public comment before I go back up to DPW. Okay, I'm seeing none. Do we want to start the RFQ? We want to take a break for a few minutes and see if Karen joins us.
Either or.
Yeah, Jason, why don't you lay out your process, if you wouldn't mind, if you want to just take a couple minutes into that before Karen comes, of how you anticipate going through the RFQs, and again, just the process you're going to use to review.
Sure, I think that's a great idea. And I specifically gave Mark a heads up earlier that I was going to just ask him to weigh in as the chief procurement officer for the town as well, having been through far more of these than all of us. But I think the important thing to remember for tonight's discussion is no one knows what anyone's thinking walking into this meeting, right? We've all had access to the RFQs, but no one has seen anyone scoring. But at the end of this meeting, everyone does need to send their sheet, because it is a matter of public record. So whatever scores you disclose in the meeting, to Mark, so he can just store it in the files. We are voting tonight simply on who we want to interview. We have 5 firms that submitted based on the bidding criteria and submitted our RFQs that were opened by Mark's team. We can bring in all 5, we can bring in just 1, or we could decide to scrap and start over. That's the magnitude of where we could go with tonight's discussion. Ideally, we will decide who we want to interview. We'll set an interview date, which we can do while we wait, assuming there's firms that we want to interview, and decide on the form of how we're going to do that. It would then be after that interview that we would meet, deliberate, and make a recommendation. Even at that point, it's a recommendation. The Board of Selectmen ultimately are the awarding authority in this instance. Having been through this process specifically related to an OPM and a designer on the public safety building, I'll share one thing that I think is really, really important for everyone just to consider from a designer perspective. There's a specific statute in Mass General Law, and Ms. Esposito wrote the RFQ to comply with this Mass General Law, that whatever firm we hire to do the space needs, whatever outcome and design that comes out of that process, right? So if you're renovating a building, remodeling a building, constructing a new building, this firm, we would not have to, we can, but we wouldn't have to go back out to RFQ again for a designer. So the decision that we ultimately make and recommend to the Board of Selectmen has the potential of being a very long lasting relationship for the town. Again, the great thing for the town, I think, though, is we do have the chance to RFQ it at any point in time if we're not satisfied with the service that's received. But it is different than, I think, other processes that happen in the town where you start a project, you finish a project, and it's done. This is certainly going to have phases depending upon the outcome of the school decision and the outcome of where we decide to go with our current building inventory. Specifically, obviously, do schools get repurposed? Do they not? And do we construct something new if the schools don't become available?
Jason, can I ask a
Right.
question on the process? You said we could interview possibly all 5, we could interview 1, or we could interview none of them. I was looking at the actual RFQ that went out. It says we were going to pick 3 finalists as a result of this scoring process. So I just wanted to kind of understand how that would play out, because I kind of, when I was rating these, I kind of put them under that lens of which 3 did I think were the best. So I wanted a little bit of clarity on that.
I mean, that's certainly what the intent is, Jeff, because it may, like, if you imagine doing 5 interviews, but Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. If the committee's sitting here saying we have 5 really strong candidates and we want to see and meet the people behind the wording here, I don't think there's anything that precludes us from bringing them in. But I actually specifically think this happened with our OPM for public safety. I think we said 3, but we could only get it down to 4, and we interviewed 4. My memory serves me correctly there. So, yes, Jeff, I think from the interest of efficiency,
Okay.
that's certainly easier on us, and set the expectation. I don't know, Mark, would you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you're right, Jason. You've got a little bit of latitude. I mean, obviously, you'd like to try to adhere to the rules of the road, so to speak, that you've laid out in the RFQ. And again, it may be easier, to just bring through 3, maybe 3 come through. I guess it's a little premature, I guess, until you've gone through, see what you've got. And then maybe you have an issue, maybe you don't have 3, that you feel you want to bring forward, and maybe you have more than. So I think let it play out and see where it takes you first.
Any question that before I walk through how I'm going to kind of go around the horn? Okay, so my intent, and I welcome feedback on this, was to do 1 firm at a time, have everyone kind of disclose where they were at, and any highlights they wanted to highlight. And then I'll probably do a rotation so that one person isn't kind of leading each time. And then at the end, we can deliberate, whether we want to narrow it to 3 or do something different based on where we came out. I will try to keep track as best I can of where I think, if there's a strong consensus one way or another, but obviously that's why it's going to be just important to have the appropriate records as we go through this. The only other way I could think of doing it would be to go around the horn and have each person tell me how they, who their top 3 were, and go from there. That's the other way to do it. I'm not wed to either approach, so would welcome feedback on from the group.
So, Jason, I guess I'll jump in. So when I read through it as well, I read the 3 finalists as well. So I graded them 1 to 5, but I focused more on my comments on the 1 to 3 because I thought that was what we were looking for. So I'm not wedded to either, But again, it just how I rank them. I gave more rankings to the ones that I thought were 1 to 3.
Okay.
I mean, I stack ranked them too, and maybe and I think 3. I think if we can bring 3, I think, and that's the right number. But
Okay. Does everyone want to go to the 1 through 3 route then?
I think we can whittle it down to 3 and then talk about those 3 and then figure out what that might be easier, faster.
Okay. So let's plan to do that. I see Miss Galligan is here, so I'm going to bring her in, and then we're going to come right back in. And Andrew, full disclosure, I'm coming to you first.
Okay.
Hi, Karen.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I couldn't see anything. All right. Okay.
We can hear you now.
Yes, you can hear me, right?
We can. Thank you for joining us, Karen. We are ready to talk about the DPW yard tractor, and obviously our committee had a chance to discuss it last time. I sent you a summary of the discussion. I know you've had a chance to talk to Mark and Brian a little bit more about it. You sent further information, which the committee all has. So really what I wanted to do, Karen, is maybe just open it up to the committee, especially those that had questions last time about, what other questions you have for Karen so that we can give her a thumbs up or thumbs down in our recommendation to allow her to plan accordingly one way or another. So I don't know. I'm just going to this is going to be open discussion. So if anyone has any questions, comments based on last meeting's discussion or the subsequent details that Karen provided to the committee. Anyone?
I guess I'll just jump in. So Karen, thank you for putting this together. I think it was based on our discussions and the questions we had from before. I think for me anyway, I think this answered to how you ended up to where you ended up. And again, thank you. I have no further questions that I don't think that you answered with the details that you provided.
Yeah, I would say, Karen, I think, you answered, obviously, the questions I had. I still have a little bit of concern of having, something that old that is supposed to last till 2033, but for the amount of money, if you feel it's going to last that long, take your word for it.
I didn't think the idea was that this one that we're repairing had to last to 2033. Am I incorrect in that?
So our plan is that it'll be the yard tractor through that time, and then at that point we'll evaluate what we have. It's such a workhorse. These our Model Max from the 80s are just real good trucks. Like I said, it's just the frame that's the problem on this one. So it might have more life in it than our current tractor that we're using, the 2008, but we will evaluate that at the time. But the plan was that yes, we'd at least have it as a yard tractor until 33.
So I'm in support of the repair because I think the body, it's obviously a body repair. It's not a motor repair. But what I would encourage Karen, you to do is I think the committee had a lot of discussion last time of viability towards 2033. And while this certainly will help you in the short term to make these repairs, strongly encourage you to look at whether acceleration in your capital plan is prudent. and when that should be, whether it's a couple years out, 5 years out, or even 8 or 9 years out. I don't have a view on what that should be, but would ask you to kind of rethink, is 2033 the right answer based on, will the motor last that long at that point?
Okay.
I guess, were there any other comments or questions?
None from me, no.
Me either.
All right, so I'm going to move that we support the request of the DPW superintendent related to the yard tractor repair.
Second,
Second by Lisa. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Braccio,
aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Hinterneeder,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Vaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. All right, Karen, short and sweet.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it. All right. Have a
Appreciate
good
it.
night. Bye.
All right, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk us through your top three, and we'll go from there.
Or my top three. True. Want to go best to worst or worst to best? Number three, I had TBA. I thought that the work they did in Framingham was good. It seemed like they were a little bit heavy on reliant on the outside firms. And number two, I had Weston and Sampson. They had a good team, a good experience in-house, and it was a large team. They seemed a little bit heavy on state projects or infrastructure projects, but that could kind of be, so it could move them up or down, but they're kind of second, third, kind of alternating between TBA. And then my number one was DRA. I thought their experience in town doing work with Fay was great. The fact that the engineering team they usually use is Fuss and O'Neill. They had a large team. And one other good one is I looked at the MSBA design bids for the last couple of years, and they were the only one out of the 5 to have any bids for MSBA projects, and they had multiple ones. So they had, I think, 4 or 5 in the last 2 years. So, if it's one of those, we can start a relationship with them as we start to maybe think about a renovation of a school project. I just thought that was a nice addition on top of their other qualifications.
And I think it's also probably just important is there a reason the other 2 didn't make your top 3? Just for
Yeah,
full
sure.
transparency.
So my last one was Goba. I just thought that the team was really small and it was kind of a weak presentation. And Schwartz and Silver just didn't seem to have as much relevant experience as the other 3.
Okay. All right, Joe, I'm coming to you next.
I actually, my scaling was pretty much about the same. I did have DRA out as number 1. I had the TBA and West and both sort of tied in the scoring that I did. And I'm wait a minute, Weston Sampson is working with the town currently, is it not?
I believe sounded familiar. So
Because I thought in their presentation that there was a Southborough reference in projects they were either doing or were on their board. So obviously that one sort of perked my interest as to when we had conversations about who we were going to work with moving forward and how much and on future projects. They seemed a lot more industrial public works based. So I wasn't exactly I appreciated the diversity of their team a little bit more than some of the experience based upon some of the projects that we may be having coming up in this realignment here. But yeah, I mean, sort of fortunately, unfortunately, I think our scoring board favors larger enterprises and having more diversity of experience and personnel. I had the same sort of drawbacks on my board that Andrew had for the other 2.
I believe they're involved with something downtown. I'm trying to find it. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it was, yeah, it was
So
something-
yeah, Mark just weighed in. He confirmed. They're
Wastewater,
doing
yes.
the wastewater study work. Okay. So Joe, you have DRA is number 1 in a tie between W and Weston and Sampson and TVA.
Yeah, it was pretty close, but yeah, that's about the way it was.
Okay. Okay. I will go to Steve next.
Oh, I had Weston and Sampson as my first, and not surprisingly, DRA and TVA were my second and third. For pretty much the same things that you guys were saying. I think while I like, I like the idea of BJ, but they're just so small. I just had some challenges, seeing that. So. Nothing horribly negative. It's just I think the others are higher qualified on their rankings here.
Okay. Anything else to add?
No.
All right, Jeff.
So I didn't really delineate between 1, 2, or 3 for the top 3 that I had, but I would say that the top 3 that I had were Schwartz and Silver, TBA, and DRA, so Drumney, Rosine, and Anderson. If I were to kind of pair them against the 3 of them, I would say that DRA, the only concern I had about them was it wasn't really explicitly stated or clear in terms of if they have the capacity to do the work. It was pretty silent on that piece, or not as evident as the other ones in terms of their capacity. Why I didn't choose the other ones, so Weston and Sampson, although I thought it was a very strong RFQ, it seemed to be very heavily focused on public works and their involvement with public works. And we have kind of more of a broad-based space needs study across the town. So I just thought that the other 3 were a little bit more relevant in terms of what we're looking for. And then BGA, I didn't really get a lot out of that in terms of what their experience was from a space needs study perspective, which is our initial objective. And it didn't really go back too far in terms of historical experience either. So that was my take.
Lisa.
Thank you. So it's funny to hear these because I had DRA as my 1, Weston Sampson as 2, and TBA as my 3. I also
Lisa, can you just say those one more time?
sorry, DRA, Drummy is my number 1, Weston and Sampson is number 2, and TBA is my number 3. 1 and 2, I will say, the difference was 1 point in my scale. So my 1 and 2 were very close. I didn't do Goba and Associates. I thought they were very small. I also didn't think it had a lot of historical experience, and nothing jumped out at me from Schwartz and Silver that impressed me maybe as much as some of the other presentations. That's it.
Thank you. And for mine, I was DRA, TBA, and Weston and Sampson. I guess on Schwartz and Silver, my main rationale for not having them on the list is I thought they would be someone that should be looking at a public safety facility based on, they really had one town that they cited that they've done any sort of similar experience to what we're looking for, which was the town of Wellesley. And then on BGA, just the scale of the projects that they work on are nothing compared to what we're likely looking at here in the bigger picture. And I obviously had concerns about bandwidth. What stood out to me in terms of, I want to make sure I say the right firms. I thought DRA's presentation was very strong. Jeff, I hear you on the capacity thing, but that's a great interview question if you ask me, to understand what their capacity is, who the team would be, et cetera. And but I thought they brought an extremely strong presentation, a strong team, and a lot of strong credentials. Weston and Sampson, I think, obviously has a larger breadth and a larger reach, depending upon where we go, right, as a community. And we don't know where we're going, right? That's what we're looking to figure out. So depending upon how the pendulum shifts, how they would be able to pivot. I think they obviously have a lot of in-house resources as opposed to going outside. I think there's pros and cons to that, in my own personal opinion, for a town of 10,000 residents. And then on TBA, I just thought, like, a lot of their references, this was the Concord one. A lot of references to what they've done in Concord just sounds very similar to what we're looking to do here. So I weighted that very heavily when we got into kind of not understanding our work, but just how to advance it. So that's where I kind of came out. But especially, I guess, if my notes are accurate, pretty streamlined. I don't think we care who's 1, 2, and 3. But the only exception I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everyone other than Jeff was in favor of DRA, Weston and Sampson, and TBA coming in for an interview if we stick to 3. And Jeff, your only exception was to have Schwartz and Silver in place of Weston and Sampson.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know, after hearing at least what we've talked about to date, whether that's where you still stand or whether you have additional questions or thoughts that you want to throw out there.
No, I mean, I think the points that are all of you brought up are fair points in terms of, the presentation, the resources, the experience that they have, but they being Weston. But again, I was more focused on the nature of the work that they did, and it seemed like I mentioned, very heavily focused on public works, and that's why I didn't have it in my top 3. But I will be clear that I pretty much had them all rated exactly the same, and I was trying to pick the top 3 that I thought fit the bill in terms of who we wanted to come in and interview. So I don't know. I think they all pretty much had the exact same score for me. So if we need a consensus, then we've got 5 other folks on the phone that had those 3, and I don't really have much of an issue.
I would throw out there that I thought Jeff's reasoning on that was actually really solid. When I looked at the proposals, I thought he was dead on that. That if you're looking at sort of mimicked experience, I thought Schwartz was closer than Sampson.
I guess so. I think it's interesting, Joe, because when you look at Schwartz's, there's only like one town hall type facility, right? And then I guess if you look at Weston and Sampson's proposal, just trying to find the page now. If anyone sees it quicker than I do, let me know.
It was very industrial. When I read through them and looked at Jeff's assessment there when he first stated it, I thought was what exactly the way I felt when I looked at it first time. But for me, it was the broad breadth of their personnel in bringing engineers to the table. Not many of those, not in those presentations. I mean, they were the one that really brought the engineers to the table. The rest of them were more architectural. So if we were looking for a partner moving forward, then, and they were already doing work for the town. So to me, it made sense for them to be in the mix, even though I felt that Schwartz might line up a little better with the softer skills, to put it in the architecture department.
My personal view is I don't think it matters if they're doing work for the town, especially given it's on a project that has absolutely no relation to this RFQ. That's just my own personal opinion. And unfortunately, I think we need to stick to what's in the RFQs, right? In terms of, what they submitted as their relevant experience, at least from a scoring perspective. I don't know what will come out of, obviously, interview questions, but,
Well, I was thinking ahead to, I mean, I know we're just doing the space assessment, but given potential projects on the table, being having an in-house engineering department on some larger projects would make a huge difference. So if we were forming a relationship, that was in the back of my mind. I understand. What you're saying.
So I don't know. I'm not an engineer. So but what I will say is our public safety building architect did not have an engineer on staff. They were all architects, and they subcontracted to obviously firms that they work with all the time. That at least seemed to be the experience that most other communities have had in these. So I think it is a differentiating factor. I guess it's a matter of how each of us weigh it, of whether in-house is better than subcontracting. They're clearly, all these firms are going to need engineers. It's just a matter of how they're sourcing their engineers and the quality of the relationship that they have.
I actually like the fact that DRA uses Fuss and O'Neill. He does the majority of the town's engineering.
So the only so let's just say you had a hypothetical project, right? Fuss and O'Neill's on the other side, on planning board, for example, right? Advising planning board. So they would have to work that out. Obviously, that they can't be reviewing their own work. But are you approaching it more, Andrew, from an approach of like who Karen uses, like when she needs engineering for roads or any sort of?
And I think Mr. Parent uses them for some of the assessments of roofs or things like that. For some reason, that name stuck in my head from some of his work. I also, the real one that really, I mean, it's not really in their RFQ, so I don't know how much we can take it in, but the fact that DRA is so entwined with the MSBA process, I really like that if we ever go down that route, but they didn't really list it in there, so I don't know if we can take that into consideration.
Yeah, and remember, we can't select for the schools. So if the schools ever do something, they're going to have their own building committee process. But I do think, obviously, the fact that they work so closely with MSBA clearly speaks to the vetting process that the state has done because that you don't just get on that list by accident, I guess. If anyone doesn't know, there's actually a scoring process at the end of every public building project that determines whether these contractors are allowed to bid on certain state jobs. It's mainly at the general contracting level, I believe, but there is a pretty strict scoring system that weighs into some of that stuff. All right. So is everyone good? I didn't hear anyone with BGA, right?
No.
Everyone's good with just kind of sending them B Goba and Associates. Everyone's kind of good asking Mark to do whatever is required to, thank them for their submission, but tell them we're going another direction.
Yes.
Okay. I will leave it up to someone else to make a motion on. I think there's a couple directions. We can stick to the three and vote based on the discussion we've had here, or if someone wants to make a motion to potentially add a fourth.
I think those.
I motion that we interview all four candidates: Schwartz, Silver, Drumney, Rosane, Weston, Sampson, and TBA Architects.
Is there a second for purposes of discussion?
Second.
How long are we thinking of for an interview, Jason? How long do they usually do? Half an hour?
I do half an hour.
If it's half an hour, I might have it for.
Yeah, and the reason why we should do all four is just, I mean, there's so much more you get out of the interview process than just what's written on a piece of paper. So if there's any questions at all that some of us have about one versus the other, we probably could vet it out quite easily through the interview process.
There any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Jason, just a process question on the next steps. So once we invite them in, what is your thought process on how you plan to handle the interviews? I'm just kind of thinking at it from the perspective of the board, just kind of went through this with the legal process, and we had select questions to give everybody the same fair shot, and we didn't veer from those questions in any way. So I just was curious what your thought process was as we go into the interview phase.
My thoughts are this, and I welcome others' feedback, are one is we need to come up with a list of questions. Actually, let me back up. We need to set a date for the interview. And we need to decide, it will be the only agenda item other than maybe minutes we'll do at the end or something like that. There will be, I strongly encourage no deliberation that night. I think that, at least that's what you did on the legal recently. That's what Public Safety Building did on all of our things. It just allowed some of it to sink in, but schedule a meeting like a couple of days later. Don't let it like sit for weeks on end, because obviously we need to get moving, right? And we don't even have a contract, right? Like with whichever one of these firms we go with, right? Is that just everything takes time, as everyone's well aware. So it would really be set a date, decide whether it's virtual or in person. I think a lot of that's going to depend upon availability of the membership, and come up with a list of questions. Ask the questions that night. My view is we go around a table or virtual table, and ask the same questions to all parties. And then literally everyone take notes and come back and say, this is who I want, right? And see if we get a consensus, or if there's a split on how we proceed to make the ultimate recommendation to the BOS. Any thoughts on that?
It sounds pretty reasonable.
The other thing I was going to strongly encourage is that the people that are actually going to do the work be present and be the primary people answering our questions. I think it's really important that those that are going to be our direct contacts, as opposed to our supervisory contacts, be the ones we're most comfortable with. And having been through the process before, that's what resonates when I look back to some of decisions that we made. And once you kind of have a team, until you get through that deliverable, you've got to work with that team, right? And while you need to have a strong supervisor, whether it be an owner, partner, et cetera, that will be involved and help with the kind of executive steering, it's really that person that's leading the day by day, the person we're going to put in front of every single department, or most of the department heads in this town, to really help them build their vision. We need these department heads, the boards and commissions and committees that support them, to really have faith that we've hired the right people to advance each of they all have their own agendas, right? And ultimately, right, where this is going to come to a head is these people are going to be making recommendations to us that hopefully, come from professional experience, as opposed to residents that are interested in A thing versus B thing and prioritize that way, right? These are outside advisors that are looking outside in and saying, this is what we're hearing the town of Southborough is looking for, and help us balance between all the various constituents that are going to look at this project and decide what path the town takes moving forward. And I know I threw it out there, but I would just, I guess, if we vote in favor of Jeff's motion, I would just ask Mark to make sure that that is within the 4 letters of everything we can do with how the RFQ is worded, and that there's no stumbling blocks with that, just to respect the process.
What about amending the motion to say it's the 4 if that's allowed, or the 3 if it's not? So that Mark doesn't have to come back. That makes sense.
It does, but you're gonna have to be very clear on
Which
which
3?
firm, which firm are in those 3.
Okay.
Because so hang on. So Jeff either needs to, we either need to vote on Jeff's motion, or Jeff needs to withdraw his motion and a new motion needs to be made.
I will withdraw my motion.
Okay. So Andrew, do you have a motion you want to make?
I move that we will interview 4 candidates: Schwartz and Silver, Drummy, Rosane, Anderson, Weston and Sampson, and TBA Architects Incorporated, if so allowed, as part of the RFQ process. If that is not allowed legally, we would interview 3 firms: Drummy, Rosane, Anderson Incorporated, Weston and Sampson, and TBA Architects Incorporated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Is there anyone that wants to split the motion?
What would that accomplish? Just curious. I mean, because
Well, I'm just trying to be respectful of everyone had different opinions.
It's just Jeff, if for whatever reason Mark comes back and legally it's at top 3 in the RFQ. If he comes back and says, no, we said 3 in there, we can't bring back 4. But
I'm saying if we split the motions, what would that accomplish?
Well, it allows each member to vote if they believe strongly that there's a strong 3rd candidate. Because I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is, one, I feel like I have an obligation chairing the meeting to respect the fact that I have differing opinions here, right? And I think that vote forces everyone to one opinion, or it may force a no vote on something that someone believes. That's part 1. And part 2 is, if we cannot do more than 3 for whatever reason, I just don't want to have someone be at a I don't want anyone at a disadvantage going into a process. So what I kind of was in favor of Jeff's motion, the original motion. And while I don't want to come back, I think it's the fairest thing to do to allow for a proper deliberation. If just hearing what I heard in this meeting, where we had some people on the fence of, I think it's clear that 2 vendors everyone wants to hear from. I think there's 2 other vendors that we have roughly a split. It may be 4-2, maybe 3-3, just based on some of the discussion, right? Just to not put anyone at a disadvantage going into the next phase.
Jason, do you want me to text Mark and ask if he can come back? And we can just ask him the question and then make the correct
Yes.
motion? Okay,
Yeah,
just did. Just
Okay,
said-
thank
Just
you.
give him a minute.
yeah.
Andrew's bar stools are looking really inviting about now.
now that we're out of quarantine, everybody come over.
Andrew, it looks like a virtual background tonight, but I know it's not.
Somebody on my call yesterday said that and didn't believe me, so I went over and picked up one of the chairs.
So I texted him, Jason, and he didn't answer yet, and I tried to call him and it went to voicemail. So I know that's not much help.
I mean, I'm looking at the folks that didn't initially support that. Just want to make sure everyone's okay.
Maybe
If we go down to 3.
Maybe we could split the vote. That'd be my preference, but. Or split the motion. I'm sorry.
We can go back to the 4 or bust. I'm fine with that.
All right. So Andrew, can you withdraw your motion?
I'll amend my motion to just the first half and
Okay.
discard the concept of if we have to go to 3.
Okay. There's a second to Andrew's.
Second that.
Okay. Just for discussion, I'm going to encourage, if we do not, let's vote on this, then we can discuss whether we're going to do another motion. So let's do a roll call vote unless there's any further discussion. All right. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Hinterneeder,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. I'm going to discourage us from making a future motion on this. And if we really have to, let's come back in 48 hours and just vote on 3 if needed. I think it's what I don't want is, while this meeting is obviously videotaped, there's obviously differing opinions. I prefer not to have a formal vote of what if we have to go down to 3 if we're perfectly fine to have the 4 come in. Because all we're doing is making it a fair process, saying members of this committee saw something in each of those 4 proposals that they wanted to vet further verbally and interview these candidates for. How anyone could argue that that's not fair, I don't know, but that's why we have experts in this area that deal with this all the time.
Could we take a straw poll that the 2 we would be discussing between would be Schwartz and Silver and Weston and Sampson? Just to kind of ring fence the discussion if it came to that. Does that make sense?
I think that's clear based on the discussion that's already ensued, unless someone disagrees with that. I didn't hear anyone that didn't have DRA or
TBA.
TBA.
I just didn't want to open it up to.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do, though. I am going to motion that we eliminate B. Goba and Associates, PC Architects, from consideration.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Interneeder. I saw your voice. I didn't hear it, Steve.
Aye.
Got it. Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. So that's unanimous. So at least you haven't heard back yet, right? I mean, he kind of gave us the okay already, but that's why I feel like we're on the right path here. So let's talk about when we want to do this in the format that we want to do this. I'm very cognizant of the upcoming holiday, that obviously there's a lot of vacations probably on both sides of that week. So the question is, do we want to rule out the next 2 weeks altogether and go to the following week, which would be the week of the 12th? Do we want to do it in person? Do we want to do it virtually? Do we have to do it virtually based on people's locations? That's what I'm just trying to figure out. And obviously, we don't know what these firms' availability are going to be, but obviously, if we have a virtual option and they are maybe not necessarily in their normal spot, hopefully they would still have capacity to join us on the chosen night. So, anyone have a strong view, vacation plans, etc.?
No, I think virtual would be easier for me, but that's my preference.
Definitely virtual gives us flexibility.
Okay. So anyone opposed to doing virtual for this? Okay. What week do we want to target? I feel like we need to give at least a week's notice to the respondents on the date, just out of professional courtesy.
Yeah, I think after the 4th, that week of the 4th is probably better. But is that too far out? If we work backwards, when do we want them to start? Is that okay?
Well, I think the important thing is the next BOS meeting, Lisa, is July 13th after tomorrow night.
Correct.
Is that correct? So the key thing is to have a recommendation, hopefully, because then are you taking a month till your next meeting, absent a special meeting?
Yes, we don't come back until August, I think it's 17th, Jason. Unless
Okay.
we had a special meeting.
All right, so, well,
Oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Andrew.
Lisa, with the amount of departments that this touches, it's pretty much town-wide, right? Would we want to do a joint kind of session with the BOS to interview them? Or are we going to interview all 4 and then you guys are going to interview, I don't know, our top 3 or 4 again? I'm wondering if it makes sense.
Typically, we would make a recommendation, and obviously the board has the ability to watch the tape of our meeting to concur or not concur with that decision. And it's a recommendation. Just to be clear, it would be a recommendation to enter into contract negotiations. Then Mark and probably one member of our team here would work through the logistics of an engagement letter with that firm, right? Because we're not vetting this based on price, we're vetting it based on qualifications.
And typically, Andrew, Jason's right. I mean, a lot of times contracts will come or recommendations will come before the board for contracts and whatnot. And we've watched the meeting, we've got the information, and we kind of depend on you to give us the information that we need. And I would imagine where it's virtual, most members of the board are going to watch it anyway.
I just wasn't sure if you wanted the opportunity for your board to ask questions or not, but if you're okay with the video, then I think it's fine.
And I can certainly ask the question as well, Andrew, but I think typically, that's how it's done. Recommendations come to us from the committees that are doing the interviewing.
And I would at least say, if you're going to ask your board, I would just encourage them, if they have specific things they want to hear in the interview, that they send myself an email and I'll compile it so that their questions are encompassed as part of our interview.
Okay, that's fine. But also, Jason, I know with when we just went through our interview process as well, 30 minutes isn't a lot of time. So I don't know how you want to, 5 members on this board, and then if you add on another 5 members of the Board of Selectmen asking questions potentially as well.
I think it's to get themes. I think Andrew has a good point, be respectful, but I also would say what is our committee doing if the Board of Selectmen are just going to re-interview? I think it's like the balance we're trying to find here, right? Of trying to be respectful of your time as well of everything else that needs to be accomplished for this town.
No, I appreciate that, and I will ask the board.
Okay.
I will. Thank you.
Jason, we have the 6th already. Bookmark for a meeting. Should we consider repurposing that one if firms are available?
Sorry. What do you mean we have the 6th?
I have another meeting on the calendar already on the 6th for this committee. It's on my calendar.
Like your 10th?
July 6th.
I'm not aware of that.
I don't know how it's on my calendar. I don't know how I got it.
Yeah. So we've
Never mind.
Okay. So, so I think the goal is to have a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen by July 13th. Would be, if you use your term, Andrew, work backwards, which means I think we need to officially meet and deliberate by Friday, the 9th. So what I could recommend is we do a evening meeting on the 7th and a morning meeting, evening meeting on the 7th for purposes of interview. And then a morning meeting on the 9th for purposes of deliberation.
I think that would work unless, I don't think, we don't have an advisory. We're not going to have one that weekend, right?
I don't see it on the calendar.
But
I'm just wary of Tuesday is so close to the holiday. 'cause
Yeah,
most
I
people
don't
are
like Tuesday.
celebrating.
I'm just, usually every 2 weeks we have the advisory, but let's book it. And then if we can work around it with Kathy.
Okay. How does that work for everyone else?
Mornings might get a little squirrely for me depending on what time it is, but
We'll do a preference, Joe.
if it's gonna be in the morning, I mean, we have to start on the earlier side.
I agree. Yeah, Joe, that.
That's other than that concern. I mean, I'm gathering that at that point, we can make our conversations pretty short, but
That means 7:30.
yeah, 7 probably, sometime early.
What
But
others think?
I'm with Joe on that.
I'm
I'm
also
not a
willing-
fan of 7, but I can certainly make it work.
The problem is I'm going to need it to be quick then. Like
Yeah.
an hour.
I'm not opposed to doing a second evening. So if we want,
Yeah.
if evening's better, or we can fit one
We
in.
do I would do the 8th evening. But
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that either.
So, am I hearing the vast preference is 7 then 8?
Evening 7 and 8. Or are you still
Yes.
looking at a morning? Yep, I'm fine with that.
That give everyone enough time to consider the decision.
I love you guys. 2 nights in a row would be a pleasure.
I actually think
That's
the
fine.
8th would be better, more fresh in my mind.
I mean, the only other thing I could suggest is we do it the same night, but that would be after 2 hours of hearing. So it's
I think sleep
All
on it, and the next night, I think.
all right. So let's go with 7 and 8, both virtual. And we'll do 7:30 each night, or do you want to start the interview night a little earlier?
7:30 there, because it's going to be capped pretty much at 2 hours, which is about how long our usual meetings are.
Okay.
Well, on the lighter end.
All right, so we're gonna do 7:30 each night. And I will let everyone know if Mark comes back with any advice contrary to what we discussed this evening.
So Jason, just process question before we go. So how do you want us, or when is your drop dead date for us to submit, whether it's 1 question, 2 questions each, and see where you end up?
I think we have to send them to Mark or to Mark's designee, like whether it's Katie or Lori or someone on his team. Because I don't feel comfortable getting questions from 5 other members and then formulating a document based on that. So I'll talk to Mark and send instructions. But I would assume you've probably got about a week. If memory serves me, that's exactly what we've done in other processes.
Jason, I have 2 questions. First, do we have some example questions we've asked in prior RFQ processes? Since this is fairly new to me, I just want to kind of understand the types of questions that we would ask, probing questions. I know every proposal is different and that the subject matter is clearly different on this one versus others, but just to get a flavor or taste of what we've asked would be helpful. And then second question, just on the scoring sheet, should we be sending that to Mark tonight directly?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess on your first question, Jeff, there's not too many of these out there, but I'll have Mark dig up what he has in his records.
Okay, thank you.
Whoever compiles the questions, what we will do as a committee is the questions will be circulated like at meeting time. Like they're not going to be circulated around days in advance sort of thing. And what we'll do is we'll have a person's name next to each question. So you'll ask the same question to all 4 candidates. So we'll just kind of do around the horn so they get to know us a little bit as well. But you'll be assigned a question. That part I feel very comfortable doing once I see what all questions come in, but that's how we'll kind of run through the show, and then we'll have a timekeeping process as well.
Jason,
Hey, Jason, no, you had, there were 2 questions there from Jeff. I didn't hear the second one that you said. You
The
answered
scoring
first.
sheet, my question was, if should we be submitting the scoring sheet to Mark tonight directly?
Okay, thank you.
Jason, what was the scale that we were supposed to use on the scoring sheet? I didn't quite catch that.
If you look in the RFQ, sorry.
Yep.
Starting on page page 6 at the bottom, each one has its own 0, 1, 2, some have 3.
Okay, I did 1 through 5. So I'll have to double check that.
I did the same thing, Andrew. I did 1 through 5.
All right. Anything else in the RFQs? All right. Is there any public comment from those that remain? Is there any other business of the committee? All right. I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Andrew. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Hinterneeder,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. Have a good evening.